afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociological theories, in today's lecture I am going to discuss Radcliffe Brown's structural functional approach. Now we need to understand that in sociology and anthropology, one of the initial way to understand society was to adopt an evolutionary approach. That is, society was evolving from simple to complex, from family-based to state-based society, and then we had the functionalist approach, which was given by a number of sociologists and anthropologists like Radcliffe Brown, Malinowski, Durkheim, and then it was important to understand how do we understand function, and Radcliffe Brown's focus was to understand the function from a structural perspective. That is, that he was not just a functionalist. Radcliffe Brown was a structural functionalist. This means that he was concerned not just with the customs and social institutions fulfill certain needs of conditions of existence, but Radcliffe Brown was also concerned with the connection between social relationship of various kind. His approach can be understood through his study of ceremonial weeping among the Andaman Islander. So to recall, he has done his ethnographic study among the Andaman Islanders, and he studied totemism and kinship structure. When we read his original text, we see his approach of structural functionalism coming out very clear. So before we understand his approach, let us understand what Radcliffe Brown meant by structure. So Radcliffe Brown, in order to illustrate the relationship between the structure and functions, he turns to biology. So his influence on organic analogy is evident. According to Radcliffe Brown, the structure of an organism consists of ordered arrangement of its part, and function of the part is to interrelate the structure of an organism. So we kind of take the human body as an organism. We know that it has different parts, and each of the parts are kind of having its specific functions, but the relationship between the parts are significant for the functioning of the human body, because if one part stops functioning, the repercussion can be seen in terms of the problems arising in the proper functioning of the human body. Similarly, he says that just like the organism, social structure, which is a network of social relationship, is ordered, and this ordered arrangement is among peoples and groups. The functions of persons are to structure of society and social organism. So if we look into the family and we see that family consists of different people, now the relationship between the members of the family are essential for maintaining the unity of that structure, and each performs their form in order to maintain social order. According to Radcliffe Brown, a social structure is considered as any pattern of behavior which becomes the standard feature of social system. So here the focus was on the status quo, on an order which was kind of following the norms, was following the values of the system. And structures, according to Radcliffe Brown, could be two types: concrete, such as the government, department, corporation, bureau, or they may be analytic. Analytic are concepts abstracted from concrete reality, such as the structure of authority, power, control, or accountability. So when we look into the government, it is a concrete structure. Now each member in the government will have certain power and authority. So what is abstracted from the concrete structure is the second kind of analytical structure. In fact, social function is the interconnection between social structure and social life. Structure is not to be studied by considering the nature of individual members of group, but examining the arrangement of functions that make society persistent. So when we look into the influence on Radcliffe Brown, We know that there is a kind of a strong influence of organic analogy, positive approach, and we also see that he is kind of focusing more in terms of the acceptance of values and norms. So the idea of conflict or the idea of dysfunction is not highlighted. Radcliffe Brown further points out that the relationship part of an organism to one another are not static, though it is culturally maintained. So you go between the relationship, say between the father and the son, is according to the prescribed values and cultural norms of the society, but it need not necessarily be same. It kind of also depends on individual response to the structure, and therefore the structure is dynamic and not static. Structures and functions are logically related. So he is using two concepts, what is the structure or the function, which is the need of that structure, and there is an interrelationship between the two. And structures and functions, they support each other, they complement each other, and they is necessary for each other's continuity, because if the parts do not fulfill the assigned functions, then there are very high chances that the structure might become imbalanced, or there could be disorder. The social life of a community can be defined as the functioning of social structure. So what we do within the family, how do we maintain kin relationship, or what is the significance of a relationship between father and a son, is the functioning. So if we were to give an example, the functioning of recurrent activities such as punishment of crime or a funeral ceremony is the part plays in social life as a whole, and therefore makes contribution to the maintenance of structural continuity. So we know that even for the inside, if we kind of have a positive interpretation of punishment, the function is to ensure that the order comes back. The order which was disturbed due to the occurrence of a crime is restored through the punishment. Similarly, in a funeral ceremony, the loss of a member is kind of re-strengthened through the rituals and ceremonies and feasting. So the function is to bring back the order into the society. According to Radcliffe Brown, the importance of differentiation between structure and function is that it can be applied to the study of both continuity in form of social life and process of social change. So when we try to look into the functions which the structure kind of playing, we see that it is not static, it is changing. Now whatever the change takes place in the structure will lead to a change in the function, and through the understanding of the relationship between structure and function, the anthropologist could understand the social transformation or change taking place. Now another concept that he talks in when he talks about social structure is social personality, individual and person. Radcliffe Brown calls social personality as the position occupied by human being in the social structure. Now, social structure is a network of relationship among individuals. Now, each individual would has its own personality. Now, this personality is to a large extent dependent on the relationship that an individual has with the member. The complex formed by all these relations are closely connected with the social structure. Every human being living in a society is two things at a time. He is an individual and also a person. As an individual, he is biological organism, structures of molecules in which occurs physiological, psychological action and reactions, process and change. So it's your human body as an organism which is the individual. As individual human beings are object of study for physiologists, psychologists, human as a person is a complex of relation. A citizen of a country, a husband, a father, son, voter, member of trade union, and so on. So when we talk about the human, it is the relationship that the individual has with other members and other institutions in the society. So each of the description as a voter, as a citizen, as a husband refers to a social relationship or to a place in social structure that the individual occupies. Radcliffe Brown asserted that neither we can study person except in terms of a social structure, nor can we study social structure except in terms of person who are the unit of which it is composed. So it's a kind of a holistic understanding to study both the human person and the social structure. Therefore, he calls structure as a network of relationship. Radcliffe Brown further stated that the study of structure of a single society may provide material for comparison with other society. It may provide hypothesis but cannot give demonstrated result. Therefore, we need to know about varieties, diversities of structural system. So it's not a kind of a fixed or universal kind of a relationship that could exist between the person and the social structure. It will culturally vary from place to place, and that is where the role of sociologist and anthropologist becomes significant to understand diversity and varieties. Social personality, we can have comparative morphology of society and build classification of structural type. By analogy between society and organism, Radcliffe Brown clarifies this in biological term, that is morphology and physiology. Now, social morphology is the study of the kinds of social structure, their similarities, differences, and social physiology is the study of the way of social structure functions. So there are certain kind which is abstract, it defines the structure. However, there are certain reality which would vary from society to society, and that both needs to be studied. Now when we look into morphology and physiology, we see that the problem of morphology implies what kind of organic structures are there, what similarities and variations do they show, and how can they be classified. It involves definition, comparison, and classification of diverse structural system. Problems of physiology implies how in general do organic structure functions and persist, what therefore are the nature of life processes. Physiology refers in terms of understanding the network of person-to-person relationship. Each network we see that the individual will have a certain kind of interest, maybe of avoidance, of conflict, pattern, standardized mode of behavior, constitution having a social value and relation with a part of social structure. And that network which has a purpose or a use or meaning is referred to as physiology of the social organism, and it is to be understood in relation to the social structure. This social physiology of social structure includes processes by which social structure change or new forms of social structure comes into existence. This also includes modification or transformation of social life. Now that is how he understood morphology and physiology. Next, we try to understand his contribution with reference to nature of social relations. According to Radcliffe Brown, a social relation exists between two or more individual organisms when there is some adjustment of their respective interest. Interest refers to all behavior that is regarded as purposive. The interest or purpose are thus determinant of social relationship. So every relationship, if between one and another, is based on certain kind of a purpose, and that purpose defines the structure of the system. When two or more persons have a common interest in an object, that object tends to have a value or for which the person is associated. If all the persons have an interest in observation of law, then the law has a social value and it becomes legitimately accepted by members of the society. The study of values in this sense is therefore part of the study of social structure. Thus, law, values, rites, rituals, myths, magic, religion, etc. are all related and thus a part of social structure. Institutions in the sense of standardized modes of behavior constitute the machinery by which a social structure as a network of social relations maintains the existence and its continuity. Evolution refers to process of emergence of new forms of social structure. Now, when we have looked into the way in which he understands the structure, the nature of social relationship, let us look into some of the structural features of social life given by Radcliffe Brown. The first structural feature, according to Radcliffe Brown, is the existence of social group. So, whenever we try to understand society, we know that it consists of several groups. So, social structures consist of all kinds of social groups like family, clan, moieties, social sanctions, totemic group, social class, caste group, kinship system, etc. So, each of them consists of a number of individuals and there is a set pattern of relationship among the members. The interrelationship among these groups constitute the core of the social structural phenomena. The second structural feature of social life is internal structure of the group. So, we know that there are a number of groups like family, caste, class. Now, each of this group will have a internal structure which could be different from other group or could be similar. So, for example, a family consists of, say, in a conventional sense, a four-member society which could be defined as a nuclear family where there is a mother, the father and the sibling. So, this is the internal structure which would be the relationship between the conjugal relation between father and mother, and then there is a relationship between the parents and children, and third there could be an internal kind of a social relationship among the siblings. The third feature of social life is arrangement into social classes. Now, these groups are arranged into social classes or categories. For example, we have the economic class, the concept popularized by Karl Marx, where we see that in the Western advanced society, the access to the modes of production becomes a criteria for categorization into the groups of those who are owner of the property and those who are helpless or are working on the properties of other. Similarly, in the Indian society, the major class which has been used to understand the structure of Indian society is the caste system, considered as a system of stratification based on birth and ascribed status. The fourth feature of social life is social distinction. There is a distinction between different classes, and this distinction is based on sex, economic distinctions, authority or caste distinction. For as we already said that there is a caste system. Now, when we study caste system with reference to India, we know that the four classes each are distinct from the other, and these caste has an occupational distinction. So the Brahmins are supposed to be readers of Vedic and religious text, where the Sudras or the untouchables are supposed to be doing the cleaning work. So this was a traditional way of understanding Indian society. The fifth feature is arrangement of person in dyadic relationship. Now, dyadic means a two-way relationship, person-to-person relationship. So, we have different kinds of dyadic relationship in society. One could be the master and the servant. So, we have the master is controls the servant or the slave. So, dyadic relationship could also be between the capitalist and the working class. So, these features are helping us to understand the structures. But the ultimate component of social structures are individuals as human beings, and the human beings or individuals in these classes or groups like family, kinship, the social groups of all kind. So, social structure is not the same as social relationship, but it includes a more holistic relationship between the group, between the members of the group, and how they respond to the social structures. We can neither study person except in terms of social structure, nor can we study these social group only with reference to individuals or persons who are the unit of study. These relationships are patterned into an institutionalized manner. The person-to-person relations are maintained due to some adjustment of their interest, and therefore there is lot of purposive. So we have understood with reference to gender that there is kind of institutionalized acceptance of the women as domestic worker and men as a kind of breadwinner. So this institutionalized relation or gender relation helps us to understand the way in which the structures are kind of response to the relationship between man and women. Now, when we try to understand his contribution, we see that there are a lot of critique or there are a lot of limitations to which his study has been subject to. So, the structural and functional approach of Radcliffe Brown has been subjected to a great criticism. According to some critiques, it is wrong to look at society as living organism because the structures of the living organism does not change, but the society does. So Radcliffe Brown was kind of adopting the organic analogy, and this critique is part of the larger critique of the functional approach, where they are trying to understand the society as kind of fixed, and change. However, we read Radcliffe Brown, he is also aware of the fact of continuity and change in the social structure. There is an error arising from assuming that one's abstraction of social situation reflects social reality on all details. The functions of units of society are determined and analysis is done on the basis of imagination. So one of the critique of the structural functional unit is that you are assuming these structures, and therefore they cannot be a generalized structure in all society across space and time. So this generalization has been done without the presence of any concrete reality. The third critique of structural functional approach is that the explanations are technological, where the functions can be used in terms of purpose. So there is a causal relationship, causal tautological relationship, that every structure has a function, and the function or the purpose has to be fulfilled to maintain the structure. What could be that there is a discordance between the structure and function has not been analyzed. The fourth critique is that structural functionalism believe in static in place of dynamic, but it does not deal with the changes. The structural functional approach mainly supports capitalism and the ruling class leading to the exploitation of the people to be ruled. So the structure or the status quo of inequality or hierarchy is not critiqued, is not questioned, and therefore assumed to be supportive of the upper side or those who are powerful and dominant. Next critique, the approach treats social order as integrated whole. A situation sometimes arises where society can be seen in a state of imbalance and disequilibrium. Although there has kind of been critique in a number of factors, the contribution that Radcliffe Brown has done does not kind of get swiped off. So it's very important to understand that Radcliffe Brown, as a classical anthropologist, laid down the pillars of the way in which structures could be understood. So what are his significant contributions? Number one, his approach provides a foundation of knowledge and law by which the social behavior can be controlled. Number two, structural functionalism approach of Radcliffe Brown gives a conceptual framework through which the observation and explanation of social event is scientifically possible. Number three, this approach builds some theories and principles by which social facts can be easily explained. And therefore we see that to take him further, we have a number of sociologists like Talcott Parsons, Merton, and even Levi-Strauss, who would prefer to use the structural perspective in understanding social reality. To get a good understanding of the contribution of Radcliffe Brown, it is important to read these two important books. Number one, a book published by T.B. Bottomore, 1971, which is A Guide to Problems and Literature, published in New Delhi, Blackie and Son. Number two, Radcliffe Brown's own original work, which is Structure and Function in Primitive Society, published in 1952. So these two references will give a good sense of the Radcliffe Brown's contribution to structural functional perspective. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.